Well, good morning, folks. This is Billy Trout, a manager of taxpayer education for the Tennessee Department of Revenue. And on behalf of our Commissioner, David Geragino, and our good staff here in Taxpayer Services and other places in our department, we welcome you to today's presentation of tax issues or tax exemptions for our military service members. So as we begin this, we want to thank you not only for joining us today, but for any of you who have past service in the military, current service in the military. We want to thank you for that service, and we appreciate what you have done and what you currently may be doing for all of us as U.S. citizens. And again, much appreciation to all of you. So today we're going to go through some different types of tax issues at the state level that we commonly encounter relative to a lot of different things, but mostly seems to be that we get mostly questions about vehicles. So we're going to be talking with you about that. And of course, on screen right now, you have Miss Katie Julian. She is our webinar specialist in our taxpayer education section. So most of the material you see here today is because of her. So she does a great job with that. And joining us as an expert today is Lisette Heron. Lisette is a supervisor who has the unfortunate task, like Katie does, of having a very terrible boss. Yes, that's me. So anyway, we've got both these smart ladies here with us today to give you all their information and to guide you along. And last and certainly not least is my boss, Dan Vinson, who is our assistant director in taxpayer services. So he'll be monitoring chat, helping us along and making sure that we're behaving properly. How about that?
Hello, everyone.
There you go, Dan. Good to hear your voice. So anyway, with no further ado, we will go ahead and let Katie take over, talk about a few housekeeping things, and go ahead with the presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being with us today. I'm especially excited to have Lisette join us as an expert on this webinar. Not only is she a member of my team under Billy's leadership and Dan's leadership, but she's actually also a military spouse. So she's dealt with this firsthand as well as from a professional standpoint. So excited to have her. She's always been my guru to go to for anything regarding the military exemptions. So real excited to have Lisette with us. Just a few things, like Billy said, on the screen in front of you, if you end up experiencing any issues, we have found in time that the best way is to leave and then come back into the webinar. You can do that if you have technical issues. We will have a video of this webinar in our webinar video library, either later today or tomorrow. When you leave the webinar, there will be a survey. If you need CPE credit, you just complete that survey. It's not just for CPE credit, it's also for you to give us feedback on our webinar. But specifically, if you need CPE credit, make sure you fill out that survey at the end. And there's a little bit of contact information for us. We'll, about halfway through the webinar, when we get done with the slides, we'll open up the chat. It is closed right now, but we'll open that up for your questions, and we'll provide this information to you again. But our email is revenue.support@tn.gov. Call us for questions at 615-253-0600. And then here is a QR code for a link to a PDF of this presentation. You won't be able to click on these hyperlinks directly from your WebEx screen, but if you download this PDF, all the hyperlinks will be live and you can follow along that way if you would like. One thing I want to mention, especially because it's apropos at this moment, because our Tennessee General Assembly is in session. Sometimes I kind of skim over this slide, but if you're watching a video of this or any of you watching us live, we do want to just make sure that you understand that the information that we're presenting is current as of the date that we are presenting this information. Our General Assembly members here in Tennessee are meeting as we speak. The laws change every year, especially regarding military benefits and exemptions and stuff. It's not uncommon for there to be changes to this specific topic. So again, all this information is good as of today, February 25th, 2025, but we've got some links here to our tax manuals. We'll talk a little bit more about that help articles. And then also every year, we have legislative summaries posted by year and by tax type. There's a link to it if you've got the PDF downloaded. Good way to see there what happens each year in our General Assembly and if laws do change pertaining to tax issues that affect you. We also do every July have a webinar regarding all the tax changes that happen. So that's coming up here in just a few months. So without further ado, we will go ahead and get started here on military exemptions that the state of Tennessee offers. Our Tennessee law does provide for certain tax exemptions for military members and for veterans. We're going to be covering today most specifically, a lot of information about the sales tax exemption, specifically about vehicles, who qualifies, required documentation, lots of ins and outs of that. We will talk about a couple other taxes, the professional privilege tax and business tax. There are a couple exemptions there. We will, like I mentioned, about halfway through this webinar, we will be opening up the chat for your specific questions and we'll have a little conversation. We are not going to be getting into license plates and that type of thing today, even though the Department of Revenue works with the county clerks to administer title and registration. That's an issue that we're not talking about today, just the tax stuff. All right, sorry, technical difficulty. First thing I want to share with you all is a link here. If you've got the PDF, you can click on this whole screen here. We have a tax manual that is specifically dedicated to military members and veterans. Everything we're going to be talking about today, this tax manual will go into much greater detail about. This we just updated this actually a couple weeks ago, or even more recently than that. So as with all of our tax manuals, we update those as needed. Great resource there that we internally here at the Department of Revenue Taxpayer Services have to reference ourselves multiple times a day. So great resource for you guys and for us as well. Glad we have this specifically for military members and veterans. I do know, I think that today's audience, just from looking at the registrations, I think we've got some automobile dealers that are in here, very appropriate. We've got some county clerks and employees from county clerks' offices, and then probably a lot of military members themselves. So glad to have you all with us today. So the first thing we're going to cover here is what is exempt? There is often confusion about this. What qualifies for the sales tax exemption? Definitely vehicles, automobiles, trucks, motorcycles do. Off-highway vehicles also qualify. Mobile homes, you'll see here that there is an exception that if they are on a permanent there's an exception here for permanent homes on a permanent chassis that are 8 foot by 40 foot in length or 320 square feet. House trailers are exempt. Camper trailers, those are exempt. What does not qualify? And again, I always like to preface, we here at the Department of Revenue, we don't make the laws, we just administer them. This is the way the law is written. That leased vehicles, semi trucks, boats, unfortunately, just regular trailers do not at this point qualify for the exemption. So hopefully this makes it pretty clear here what qualifies and what does not. All right, here's where it gets a little more in depth here. Who is exempt? Now, one thing I want to qualify here is that when we say in Tennessee, pretty much the rest of this webinar, assume that we are also including a military reservation that is located partially within Tennessee, which of course would include Fort Campbell. Fort Campbell, by the way, I looked it up just this morning, and I did not know this, is the second largest U.S. military base, the second largest. It's home to approximately 30,000 active duty military members. And then, of course, one thing that I know that we're real proud of with Fort Campbell, it's the only air assault division in the world with the 101st Airborne. So with 30,000 active duty just at Fort Campbell, there's other bases in the state as well. So this exemption can affect a lot of military service members. So again, being stationed in Tennessee, if you are technically on the Kentucky side of Fort Campbell, wherever that base lies within Tennessee and Kentucky, but when we say stationed under orders in Tennessee, we're including all of Fort Campbell there. So who is exempt? Back to the slide. A member of a uniformed service in active military service of the United States who is stationed under orders in Tennessee, or, now these are all or, a member of the Tennessee National Guard or reserve member of a uniformed service of the United States who is a participant in the AGR program and stationed under orders in Tennessee, or members of the Tennessee National Guard or reserve member of a uniformed service of the United States who has been called into active military service and is stationed in a combat zone. Now the combat zones, we're going by the, you can see that that's a hyperlink. If you've downloaded the PDF, you can click on that. That is a link that will always take you directly over to the current combat zones for tax exemption purposes. So just a note here, service members of foreign militaries, even if stationed in Tennessee, are not eligible for this sales tax exemption. Likewise, because veterans are not current service members in a branch of the United States military, they are not eligible for it. However, disabled veterans may be sorry, we're talking about disabled veterans here, may be eligible for an automotive adaptive equipment exemption under the Vehicle Affairs Automotive Grant. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. So who is exempt? We just talked about what qualifies you to be exempt, but who exactly within that is going to be exempt? The vehicle must be titled and registered in the name of the qualifying member or jointly owned by the qualifying military member and one of the following. And this is according to Tennessee statute. Lineal relatives here includes a spouse, parent, grandparent, great grandparent, a child, including an adoptive child, grandchild, great grandchild. Unfortunately, non qualifying owners, co owners, according to statute, are siblings, step parents, and stepchildren at this point. Now, when we say jointly owned, that can mean on the title, it can say and or. So the qualifying military member and their spouse or their spouse. Either one of those works. So another important thing here when with regards to this exemption is taking into account the place and the date of the purchase of the vehicle, camper, qualifying item. If the motor vehicle is purchased in Tennessee, taxes due at the time of a purchase for purchases in Tennessee. So orders must station the service member in Tennessee at the time of purchase. That goes for even if it's a private party purchase. You've got to go straight to the clerk's office to title and register, right? So um, if the motor vehicle is purchased outside of Tennessee, then tax is going to be due upon registration of that vehicle. So the exemption applies if the member, is stationed in Tennessee at the time of registration. So that is when you go to the local clerk's office to title and register. That's what they're going to be looking for there. So if the service member purchases a motor vehicle in Tennessee before being officially stationed in Tennessee, the service member exemption does not apply even if the service member registers the motor vehicle after being stationed in Tennessee. Conversely, if the service member purchases a motor vehicle in Tennessee while officially stationed in Tennessee, but registers the vehicle after expiration of their official orders, that exemption may still apply because the member was stationed in Tennessee at the time of purchase. All right, there's a lot going on here on this slide. We're not going to go over everything, but hopefully this is a slide that you can save for future reference. To establish the eligibility for this military service member exemption, the purchaser is going to have to provide the county clerk or the seller of the vehicle with certain documentation that's going to allow that clerk or the dealer or whoever to determine whether or not the exemption is applicable. So what you see in this list are different types of documents. It's not an exhaustive list. These are just the most common documents, and it will let you know here if the document is indeed an order. It must be an order. So there's only 5 things listed here that are acceptable orders, and then also if it is a loan sufficient, if it has the information we need on it. So you can see just from eyeballing this chart, a PCS or a request and authorization for PCS. If they have the information that we need on them, that's all you need. There are some other orders that are going to require some other pieces of documentation to go along with that order in order for us to determine if the um, exemption is applicable. So we're going to start breaking these down here. And this is where I hope to get Lisette's input here because she is an expert on this. These military orders, y'all, can be pretty difficult to decipher. Sometimes they make my eyes just cross when I start looking at them. It's just a lot of words on a lot of sheets of paper, and it's hard to make sense of what you're looking at. But what you're going to be looking for, um, first off, on the PCS, the permanent change of address, you're going to be looking for the name, of course. Let's that come back in here. You can just stay here stay on duty here with me during, no pun intended here, while we're talking about this stuff, because I really want your input here. You're definitely going to be looking at a report date and an end date, and very importantly, a report to location, right, Lisette? Yep, unmute.
It happens every time. Sorry about
Yep,
that, y'all.
yep.
Okay, so thanks, Katie, for having me over. So something that, of course, we cannot give you an example of every single order. All the branches have their orders set up in a different way. Some are easier to read, but what we have to focus, like Katie said, is of course on the name to ensure that the person requesting the exemption is listed on those set of orders, the dates and the reports, and they need to be located in Tennessee, right? So what I would always recommend when you look at a set of orders is start with the heading. So if the heading is coming from a branch that is not a National Guard, then that gives you already a hint that those set of orders should be for an active duty member. So somewhere on those set of orders, you will see a Title 10 code. That is the military code for stating that that service member is on active duty, right? Um, of course, if the set of orders is not from a branch that is the National Guard, and is, for example, we have a Department of the Air Force, for example, National Guard, right? It will have a Tennessee address. When you have these set of orders, the keyword to look for will be for the status of AGR, right? Once you find that keyword, then you are already in the pathway and those orders most likely will qualify. Once you have verified the name of the member, another way is so important is to check on the date when those orders were issued. We know that some service members will change duty stations and they remain at that location for several years, right? So if a service member came into Fort Campbell in 2020, um, they are still currently at Fort Campbell, and this is 2025. If they haven't changed anything on their duty station and they're remaining at Fort Campbell, they will not receive another set of orders stating that they're still at Fort Campbell. In that case, we will definitely recommend to go back into the list that Katie showed in the previous slide and see what other supporting documentation would need to be added to this set of orders. So
So
Um,
what's an example there, Lisette? So you're talking about, the orders are from 2020, like you said, stationing
mhm.
them here. Maybe a leave and earning statement that would say that they're still there. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. So we will need most likely the set of orders. The LES will show where the member is currently residing, and
Okay.
as well as most times the commander will send in a document acknowledging that that service member is still on active duty at that specific duty station and at that specific unit, if applicable.
So if you're a military service member on this webinar, which I think we've got some service members on here, thank you, first of all, it would be a good idea to make sure before you even go to the dealership or to the clerk's office, just to save yourself some headache, to make sure, because I think that it's probably pretty often that a military service member is going to understand their orders more than a dealer, or I don't know, clerks are pretty good at it because they see it a lot too, but um, make sure you've got your ducks in a row before you even go to make the purchase, because if you don't want this holding things up. You want to make sure that what you're looking at, what you're providing them a copy of, is going to be sufficient for them to feel good. And of course, I just saw, I don't know who put it in there, Billy, I think put in the chat. Call us, email us.
Mhm,
Usually, I think it's Lisette, it's you and your group that when the emails come through, we'll look at these orders. If you're
mhm.
wondering about if an order is sufficient to qualify for this, for the exemption, we'll look at it, right, Lisette?
Absolutely. Yes. So if you ever have a question whether a purchase is exempt, please send us a set of orders. If you glance at those orders or the taxpayer states that the member states that they were in the combat zone, please go ahead and ask them for that supporting order to show that the taxpayer is assigned, for example, to Fort Campbell, but they were in the combat zone.
Okay, right.
Every person who is assigned to the combat zone will always receive an additional set of orders. So we will always need to see that.
Gotcha. Okay. One thing I want to note before I move on from this slide right here, and I think that we talked about this the other day, Lisette, orders printed off of a website may be accepted. Is that right?
Yes, yes. When you glance to those orders, usually at the bottom of the page where they mention the commanding officer, there will be a caveat stating that those orders are valid without a signature.
Okay. Doesn't have to
Yes.
be anything. So just print it off the website is fine. All right.
Mhm.
Um, we can, I think, move on to the next slide here. Anything else about PCS that you want to, we can always go back to this if we need to as
Well,
well.
one last thing I just want to add, right? So, in some of the orders, remember I stated that the date of the order is very important. So, most times, a soldier receives a set of orders, for example, in January 2025, with a reporting date of March 15, 2025. So, it's very important to check what is the date of purchase of that vehicle, for example, right?
Mhm.
Uh, if the soldier purchase a vehicle without checking into their new duty station, that purchase will not be made. Now, those set of orders, if they give you such a big window that you can report early, um, as soon as the service member reports in to that duty station early, if the orders allow it, they will receive a confirmation document that they have checked in officially to that duty station. They should provide the set of orders plus that document,
Saying that
right?
they
Stating
checked in
that they're
early.
officially
Okay.
at that duty station. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hmm.
Good to know.
Yep.
All right, we're going to move on to the next. Be holding your questions for the chat here. I know that this is a lot of information we're throwing at you, so keep those in mind. The next set of orders that we're going to talk about is the request and authorization for PCS. It's similar to a PCS in that it is an official order, so it can be provided to the dealer, to the county clerk. It stations a service member in a designated location. So we're looking here for Tennessee and we're looking at dates. It does not provide a commitment date though. So the service member is going to need to provide an LES or a similar document to prove that he or she is stationed in Tennessee on the date that would qualify them for the exemption. And again, I'm going to go back a couple slides here to looking at this chart here, the what is alone sufficient and what is not. All right, we're going to look now at a permanent change of assignment, a PCA. It is generally considered official orders. Service member must provide additional documentation showing station in Tennessee, like we've mentioned, that leave and earning statement or the ERB. A PCA or similar duty assignment contained within PCS orders sends a service member to a location other than where he or she is stationed for a temporary or indefinite duration. This is my understanding. Some examples are going to be when a service member might be assigned to a university, a recruiting office, or any other location in Tennessee. While PCAs and similar duty assignments are generally considered orders, like I said, they must provide additional documentation showing that they're actually stationed in Tennessee. We've got an example here. A service member is issued a PCS to Fort Jackson, located in Columbia, South Carolina. Within those PCS orders is a duty assignment to teach at Austin Peay State University, which is in Tennessee. This is an official order stationing the service member in Tennessee. So the service member may verify that he or she is stationed here by providing the clerk additionally with that LES or with the ERB statement. TDY, temporary duty assignment, is an official order sending a service member to a designated location, generally lasts for a shorter duration of time and does not constitute being stationed here unless there's other documentation that the military service member can provide that shows a Tennessee location. They can only be accepted for the exemption if they can prove that that with either the LES or a similar document that they're actually stationed here in Tennessee. So reservists who have been activated and stationed in a combat zone, which we talked about that already, qualify for the exemption for 90 days following the effective date of official military orders releasing that member from the combat zone. I think we're allowing a little bit of time there to get affairs in order after being released, right? So again, that exemption applies from the effective date of the military orders and expires 90 days after the effective date of the official orders releasing them. This kind of goes without saying, a service member in ROTC program is considered a reservist while in the program, but they must either be in the AGR program or deployed to a combat zone to apply for the exemption. Obviously, of course, upon graduation, they may be activated or transferred to a base here in Tennessee and would apply, and the exemption would be applicable at that point. So we got another example to go over with you. A reservist was activated from the Tennessee National Guard, let's say, and ordered to a combat zone from March 1st through July 31st. However, on May 1st, the reservist was injured and flown into a Tennessee hospital to recover from injuries. The reservist's orders were extended through August 31st to last the duration of the recovery. That 90-day time period begins on and includes September 1st, meaning the reservist may qualify for the exemption until 90 days after that August 31st date, putting it up through November 29th, end of November. When we were talking about this the other day, Lisette did tell me that this is not very common, but we've got information about this, seeing this type of document in our manual, so I included it in here. The active duty operational support document places a reservist in operational support of the active duty. It's temporary orders, generally lasting between 1 and 6 months. And to qualify for the exemption, the Tennessee National Guard member or reservist, again, must be a participant in the AGR, stationed in Tennessee, or on Title 10 orders, or on active duty assigned to a combat zone. All right. Anything else, Lisette, that you want to add? I'm sure we will have questions about this, but before I move on from looking at orders, was there anything else you wanted to add that came to mind?
No, just something to have in mind that always if those orders, these ADOS orders, you receive them, you just have to ensure, like I said, to look for those keywords, right? Title 10, AGR. And if on those orders it says, hey, they're just for training, and most times in the same orders that it will show that they are the type of operation that they're assisting with, right?
Okay.
And it will be mentioned that they will be assisting a different operation, then most times that means that they will be probably going to a combat zone. Now, then we will need those set of orders. And please, just something to have in mind, like Katie said, the combat zone list of places is regulated by the IRS.
Mhm.
So they could be located in an area that for us civilians, we could think that is a combat zone because it's a dangerous place, but it may not necessarily be under the combat zone. So we will just have to review those orders individually.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Hey, Billy.
So, yeah, one thing that comes up quite often, and Lisette mentioned it here for just a second, is Title 32 versus Title 10. So, Title 32 is the National Guard. Okay. So, Title 10 is active duty military. So, when a guard unit is activated into active military service, their orders will indicate that they're Title 10 at that point. That is maybe a little bit easier to see where that exemption is when they're Title 10. So if you see that Title 10, it's a little bit more easy to determine what this exempt status might be. Okay. Remember too that most of the time for guard members that are under Title 32, most of these military members are the ones that have joined the guard and maybe go to weekend drill, once a month, and 2 weeks in the summer for training and things of that nature too.
Which
Uh,
does not qualify
it does
for
not.
this
It does
exemption.
not qualify. That's probably one of the more common things that we see, that a guard member will say, "Hey, I think I'm exempt," and really they're not unless they're under that
Active.
active guard AGR program. The AGR program are for people who work for the National Guard, and basically that's their full-time job. They're Monday through Friday working for the National Guard. That's a difference between the person who goes on one weekend a month.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's just something to think about from that perspective. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank
All right, for now, we're going to move on from the vehicle sales tax exemption and documentation and all that. But again, hold your questions, put them in chat here in just a couple minutes because we're getting towards the end of this, getting into the slides. But we're going to talk about a couple other exemptions. One is the adaptive equipment exemption. Um, there is it's AAE, the automobile adaptive equipment that's necessary to ensure that an eligible person can operate an automobile safely is exempt. These items of AAE are exempt from Tennessee sales tax. To qualify, an applicant must be an honorably discharged disabled veteran of a branch of the U.S. Armed Forces and have a service-connected disability equivalent to those described in the law. Um, there is a form, VA form 10-1394 or 21-4502 that can be provided. And here is a link over to an important notice that gives lots of great information about details about this exemption. Likewise, there is also, Billy just informed me about this the other day. I'll put a link to it over in the chat. There is a letter ruling that can save you some time here. It has a great link over to this letter ruling that talks about what equipment is considered adaptive equipment for purposes of this exemption. So I just put that over in the chat for you. I think that went through. Yes. All right, another exemption. There is a Veterans Affair automobile grant. So vehicles sold, given, or donated to disabled veterans or active duty service members who have a service-connected disability and who receive this very specific grant called the Veterans Affairs Automobile Grant are exempt from sales tax, registration fees, and local motor vehicle privilege taxes. The tax exemption is limited to the portion of the sales price that exceeds the amount of the grant received. So the grant is in a certain amount. If they paid more, then they're not going to have to pay sales tax on that amount that's over and above what the grant they received was for. The caveat here is you must provide the copy of signed form 214502 on that. That's a Veterans Affairs form that must be signed by the VA and provided to your clerk's office when you go to register the vehicle. If you don't want to pay sales tax on that amount that exceeds the amount of the grant. There's an important notice about this. You can see the link to it right here. Important notice 1815.
So real quick on this too, it's worth noting that in what do we now, it's been about 7 years since this came out.
Mhm.
I have seen maybe 5 of these come through.
Mm.
They are very rare. When they come through, it's great. It's great for the person and it's exempt, and we want them to have the advantage of it. But just understand, if you're a motor vehicle dealer or if you're the county clerk or something like that, you may not see these
Mhm.
really ever, because the VA is normally not in a position to make purchases of actual motor vehicles for military members. However, when it happens, and through this whole process with the form that's indicated in bullet point number 3 on your screen right there, it's great. It's
Mhm.
great for these people to have that exemption. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, Billy, you're right on. It was effective March of 2018. So that was right at, about 5 years, 8 years ago now. Is that right? Yep, 8 years ago. And it does apply to new and used vehicles as well. All right, moving along here, the professional privilege tax, or we call it pro-fee here. Internally, it's an occupation tax that is on certain active Tennessee professional licensees. It's due annually on June 1st. This list you see here are the different Tennessee professional licensees that are affected. This list has shrunk considerably in the last decade or so. Used to be a long list of professions that needed to pay this professional privilege tax annually, but now we're down to attorneys, securities agents, broker-dealers, investment advisors, and lobbyists. So the professional privilege tax does not apply to any active U.S. military member if the member has served for more than 180 days during the year prior to the due date of the privilege tax, which is always due on June 1st. Eligibility for this exemption has to be supported each year by providing us with orders documenting that 181 or more days of active duty served during that qualifying period. There's also a way to delay your filing for professional privilege tax. A service member who may not qualify to be exempt from paying it could qualify for this delayed filing. So an active U.S. military member who owes pro-fee does not have to file and um, pay the tax until, 180 days after deployment to a combat zone that is outside the United States ends, or 180 days after transfer out of a combat zone, whichever is sooner. Again, proof is going to be needed for that. When filing, a member must provide proof of deployment status and the return from deployment. One more exemption that we want to talk to you about is this is again a pretty rare exemption. It's an exemption from business tax. An individual is exempt from business tax if they are a disabled former uniformed member of the armed forces who is a veteran of any armed conflict, or a peacetime uniformed member of the armed forces who was disabled while in regular service. Now, here are the caveats. You see that the boxes here, that individual who is either number 1 or number 2 here, if that individual owns less than $5,000 in tangible personal property, that can be real property or tangible personal property, I'm sorry, any property in excess of any debts on the property, does business with a capital stock of no more than 5,000, is a citizen of Tennessee and resides in the county in which the exemption is claimed, is the sole beneficiary of the business, and then there's an affidavit to complete here. That is an affidavit that if all of these things apply to you, you would in lieu of going and getting the business license from the county clerk's office, which a business license is a standard business license is tied in with business tax. You can also, for gross sales under 100, just be given what's called a minimal business license. You wouldn't even need that. If these items here pertain to you, you can fill out an affidavit, turn that into your county clerk's office. They keep that on file there, and then you do not need a business license. If you do want a business license, if you need it for another reason or want that business license, you would need to purchase it, but you don't need one. And filling out this affidavit and making claims of these items that you see here on this list would exempt you from needing to do so. All right, so we're going to bring the crew back in here. Billy, Lisette, I'm going to bring the chat online here for everyone. Let's see here. So at this point, y'all can throw your questions into the chat. I think I've got it open here.
Yes, we've got that open now. We see a couple people popping in here.
Okay, great.
And just again, wanted to reiterate one more time, if folks sometimes don't realize that they have access to this exemption when they buy that motor vehicle or when they go to the county clerk and register that vehicle. So it's important to know that they can still get some advantage on that. So what we normally ask folks to do that have gone to dealers is to go back to the dealer and say, hey, we forgot this paperwork. Can you refund me or put in a request to get this done? And if the dealer agrees, the dealer can go ahead and adjust their sales tax return for that current period um, to exempt that particular amount from their current sales. Keep copies of all the documentation and go ahead and write the qualified service member a check for back for the sales tax. Now, if that doesn't work out, then what the military member can do is to file a claim for refund with us. And we have a form on our website that you can actually go to, fill out that claim for refund and a report of debts, 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 to go ahead and submit that and try to get us to consider copies of your paperwork as well. Okay. Now, also, if you're in the county clerk office, okay, county clerks can sometimes adjust that if they have not sent their paperwork in already to the state. There's a timing issue with that, okay? So it may, but check with your county clerk first and say, hey, we forgot this. Can you adjust this? And your county clerk will advise you yes or no. If they can adjust it because the paperwork hasn't been sent in, perfect. If they can't, then just go through the claim for refund process with us. Okay. So we do want to try to honor that where we can, even if we have to back into it. So there's a whole process for that kind of thing. Okay.
Way cleaner process if you can get all your ducks in a row before the purchase and or before registering the vehicle, and you have everything you need, and that's even better.
Yes, no question
Right.
about it.
All right, so we've got some information y'all are putting into the chat to the panel here just to keep things your questions come directly to our panel, so you may see some questions getting answered to the whole group. A question, I just saw a question from Cassie about what about in-laws? In-laws are not considered lineal relatives, is that right?
Right.
That's correct.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to that
Mhm.
slide real quick.
Thomas said, when will this law take place? Hey, Thomas, it's already taken place. It's
Mhm,
been in the law forever. Well, not
mhm.
forever, but almost forever. So that's why we have the manual out there that Katie mentioned early in the presentation that sums up all this. But let me piggyback on sort of what you were getting at. Here's something interesting too, and I know that Lisette has seen this, like I have, and some of our teammates as well. We will get and clerks too get people that come in and say, "Well, right here in the law it says that we're exempt." Well, what you have sometimes are people who go out and look on the legislature's website to see bills that were proposed by certain legislators in various years, but never got passed. They never made it out of the committee. They never made it to a vote, or maybe they were even voted down. Okay. So that doesn't do you any good. So the information that we have on our website, in our legislative summaries, in our manuals, and other places like that, is the current law. And like Katie mentioned too, we update this stuff more than once a year, probably once a quarter, depending on what's going on and what kind of changes that need to be made. So, super important to realize that just because a bill is proposed does not necessarily mean it was passed. Okay. So that's a key thing that comes up fairly often.
Another thing that comes up is what you find that we had a county clerk just very recently say one of the a service member in their jurisdiction had seen on Google AI said that the veteran doesn't have to pay sales tax on a vehicle. And I don't know if if Google AI has fixed that issue or not, but can't rely on it totally yet.
Yeah.
It's cool sometimes, but when you and sure enough, when you typed in, does a veteran in Tennessee have to pay sales tax on a vehicle? It says no, they do not have to. So, as we just learned, that's not the case, but Google was misinforming people of that.
So
Um,
Katie, let me interrupt here real quick, and let's say maybe you want to tie into this as well. Sean was asking about personal property tax exemptions for veterans. So my comment on that is that we don't deal with property tax in the Department of Revenue, and we would ask that you contact your property assessor's office for any sort of real or personal property tax questions on that. Would you agree with that, Lisette?
yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Okay.
Now, there's a question on the chat from Adrian. If the purchase was made over 2 years ago, is there a way to recoup this benefit? So the we cannot honestly answer that without seeing a set of orders. If you have set of orders during the time where the purchase was made, and if those orders were, eligible for that purchase, we'll have to review that, and then it's possible that they will qualify those orders. And if that's the case, since the transaction has already been made, right? The purchase and the registration of the vehicle, then like Billy said, um, you will have to submit refund request on paper for that. But
Right.
I will definitely recommend at the end of these slides, you will have an email address where you can send any additional questions, any orders that you want us to review, and then we can provide you that information there.
Yeah, and Joe had asked if there's any common issues that we see made by auto dealers that lead to the improper application of the exemption. Um, I think just in general, things that we might see would just be to where the auto dealers are just accepting whatever kind of orders that they might want to see. Like it might be someone's National Guard orders that shows that they report to the barracks once a month, which is the Title 32 stuff I was telling you about earlier
Mhm.
that's not exempt. So we would just encourage the auto dealers, just like the county clerks do, to just review those orders and then to reach out to us if you don't understand it or it's hard to read. Um, and Lisette, I think, mentioned it earlier too about some of these orders. The ones from the Army are different than the ones from the Navy, that are different from the ones from the Air Force. So it's sort of complicated,
Mhm.
really, but we try to piece through it and give you the best advice that we can. And if you're uneasy about it, let us take. You want a second set of eyeballs on it? Send it to us. We'll be glad to look at them.
There's a question in the chat that states, would the vehicle sales tax exemption be available to military spouses living in Tennessee? Unfortunately, no. This exemption is, again, only if you're active duty, if the member is active duty, or in the AGR program, or in the National Guard, but has gone to the combat zone.
Right, but another thing to know too, that's not tax related, but just an FYI, Gold Star families can get a special license plate for their car. You can get one per family that's issued on a permanent basis. And with that particular tag, with all your qualifying documentation, you never have to pay to renew that tag on your car. So that's a advantage there from that perspective. In addition to honoring the person who's passed away, obviously, with the special plate, but the law does provide that for that person there. And I believe that you can also get additional plates, but I believe you have to pay an annual fee on those for the Gold Star plate, but one freebie on that too. And Katie, you put a link in there about the local wheel tax too, right?
Yeah, I'm not super knowledgeable about this, but here's a link directly from the Department of Veterans Affairs website that is about disabled veterans who have 100% permanent disability, so on and so forth, can be exempt from the local wheel taxes and stuff. So
Right. And our focus today is not going to be on the wheel tax. And
yeah.
we would ask you to reach out to your county clerk's office about that because they are more knowledgeable about that. And the information on this link can be very helpful as well to help you get through some of that.
Well, I'm looking here to see if there's any overarching questions that might be good to. We can go ahead and just kind of wrap things up for today. I think, let me land on this slide right here to remind you of how to reach out to us. I'm going to reiterate this: revenue.support@tn.gov is a great place to send copies of orders if you're wondering if what you are looking at, if you're a dealer or a clerk and wondering if what you're looking at is sufficient, or if you're a military member and want to know, hey, is this okay to bring in? Again, we recommend figuring that out before you go, right? If you want to know,
Absolutely.
send us a copy of those orders. Most likely it'll be Lisette or someone in her group that's looking at those, the experts here, to make sure you are getting what you need there. You can always also call us at 615-253-0600. But I think when it comes to military orders, we'd rather look at them, right? Like, it's good to
Yeah.
look at all them, send them in
And
to
then we
us.
can review the word and we try to explain why it will be qualifying or why it won't. And we will give you also an answer if you need to provide us additional documentation.
Yeah, that's always a good thing
Mhm.
about emailing us. We can have our writing and our answer in writing. Well,
Absolutely.
is there anything else that Lisette you would like to impart to this group, or Billy, anything else you want to say before we wrap things up?
Not from me. I just want to thank everybody for attending today. We had a pretty diverse group here on, a
Yeah.
smaller group, but a diverse group.
Well, just to give you some information about some stuff we've got upcoming next month in March, our free tax webinar, the last Tuesday of the month, will be on business tax deductions. That'll come just in time for business tax filing season. Then in April 29th, our free monthly tax webinar will be dedicated to taxes for wineries, distilleries, and breweries. We'll be having a new business workshop. That's different than our monthly tax webinars. We offer those quarterly. It's a pretty long workshop. We give you details, not details, an overview, I should say, of kind of the basics of starting a new business in Tennessee when it comes to your tax requirements and registration and licenses and such. That's going to be on April 2nd. You can go ahead and register for that. You register for all of our webinars by going to tn.gov/revenue and clicking on taxpayer education and outreach. Then you can click on the webinars here and the new business workshops option for that. The tax webinars page is where you'll see our webinar video library, which again, we're recording this, so you can check that out later today or tomorrow if you want to check out a video of this. And again, just want to thank you, Lisette, for being with us.
Thank you, Katie and Billy. So, and thank you for all the participants and their questions.
Yes, absolutely. And again, please take a survey on your way out as you exit. And if you need CPE credit, make sure you answer yes to question 4 and let us know how you want your name listed on your certificate there in question 5. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great one.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, all.